All right, so get this. We're diving deep after the U.S. election and what it could mean for the war in Ukraine.
Okay.
We've got these excerpts from a BBC News article, and
Right.
they lay out some really different opinions on, finding peace over there.
Yeah.
Are you ready to, unpack all of this?
Absolutely. And it's like, we're not even just talking military strategy here.
Right.
It's all about global players and how they're reacting to, a potential U.S. foreign policy shift.
Exactly.
Now that the election's over.
And this article throws us right in the deep end.
Yeah.
Some strong opinions right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
One that really grabbed my attention was Brian Lanza.
Okay.
You remember him?
Yep.
He was an advisor to Trump during his,
Right. Sure.
his first presidency.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that Lanza is saying peace should be the priority, even if it means Ukraine doesn't get back all of its territory.
Wow.
Especially Crimea. Now, hold on. Why is Crimea such a big deal?
Well, think about this. Okay. A place fought over for centuries.
Really?
It's got the strategic location on the Black Sea, super important for both Russia and Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2014, Russia annexes it.
Oh, wow.
Takes it right from Ukraine.
Wow.
It was a huge flashpoint that basically kicked off the whole conflict we see today.
So Crimea is a big deal.
Huge.
Lanza seems to be saying that Zelensky is being unrealistic by demanding it back as a condition for peace.
Yeah. And he goes even further.
Really?
Implying that if Zelensky sticks to that demand, the U.S. might not back Ukraine militarily.
Whoa.
Almost like saying you're on your own.
Wow. That's intense.
Yeah.
So is he saying that the U.S. is more interested in just stopping the fighting than, making sure Ukraine gets all its land back?
It seems that way, and this is where it gets really interesting, because
Okay.
this ties into a huge debate in U.S. foreign policy.
Yeah.
Isolationism versus interventionism.
Right.
Should we be super involved in global conflicts, or should we focus more on our own interests?
Interesting. So Lanza is kind of in that let's stay out of it camp.
Yeah, you could say that.
But is this actually what Trump thinks?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Trump's spokesperson actually tried to distance Trump from Lanza's comments.
Really?
Yeah, saying Lanza doesn't speak for Trump.
Okay.
So a lot of uncertainty there.
Of course, this has stirred up a ton of reactions. It's not like everyone's just accepting what Lanza's saying.
Definitely not. There's been major pushback, especially from Ukrainian officials.
Okay.
Dmytro Litvin was one of Zelensky's advisors.
Mm-hmm.
He basically said the pressure should be on Putin to end the war.
Yeah.
Not on Ukraine to make concessions.
So it's two totally opposite viewpoints.
Right.
Lanza is saying, let's focus on peace, even if Ukraine loses some territory.
Mm.
And Litvin's saying, no, Putin's the aggressor. He needs to back down.
Exactly. And Litvin's argument is that Putin's actually losing support for this war.
Oh, really?
At home in Russia.
Interesting.
Is there evidence for that? Is Putin's power actually waning?
Yeah.
Tough to say.
And it's not just Ukraine pushing back against Lanza.
Right.
Estonian Prime Minister Kristen Michal, she also issued a pretty strong warning.
Oh, yeah.
She argued that giving in to Russia would just encourage them to be more aggressive, in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And she even brought up historical examples of when, appeasing aggressor nations has backfired.
Right. It's a compelling argument.
Yeah.
And it shows how high the stakes are in this whole thing.
This is what I find fascinating. You've got all these leaders with such different perspectives.
Yeah.
It all comes down to their own interests and fears, right? What's at stake for them personally, for their countries?
Exactly.
It really makes you think.
It does. Yeah, it really does. And it's not just some abstract geopolitical game we're talking about.
Yeah.
Real people.
Yeah.
Their lives are caught in the crossfire.
Right.
What happens in Ukraine, it affects the whole world.
It's not just about Ukraine's borders. The outcome of this war could affect everyone.
Absolutely.
That's scary.
If Russia is seen as winning this, it sends a message.
Right.
To other countries that might have similar ambitions, it could really destabilize the whole international order.
So this is a test for democracy.
Yeah.
Can democratic countries stand together and push back against aggression like this?
That's a great way to put it. And the U.S.,
right,
as a global superpower, has a huge role to play in how all this unfolds.
Which brings us back to Trump and that end the war in a day thing.
Yeah.
It's all very vague. How could he actually pull that off?
Well, that's the big question. What leverage does a U.S. president even have?
Right.
How might Trump's approach differ from Biden's?
Yeah, because Biden was all about supporting Ukraine militarily, sending them weapons and stuff.
Right.
But I've heard some people say that Trump might go a different route, like conditional support.
Ah, yes, conditional support. Imagine the U.S. saying, we'll give you weapons, BT,
Okay.
only if you agree to negotiate with Russia and maybe even give up some territory.
Yeah. So using U.S. aid as a bargaining chip to force Ukraine to negotiate.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
But it's controversial strategy.
Okay.
Rewards Russia for bad behavior
Yep.
and sets a bad precedent for other conflicts.
Oh, man. Speaking of negotiations, there was that phone call between Trump and Zelensky right after the election.
Oh, right. And Elon Musk was involved somehow?
Yeah, it was so weird.
That was a strange one.
A Ukrainian official said it was warm and pleasant, but didn't give any specifics.
Makes you wonder what they actually talked about.
Totally. And we can't ignore all the accusations that Trump is too friendly with Putin.
Right.
Some are saying his whole approach to the war is dangerous for Europe.
Serious accusations.
Yeah.
We got to separate fact from speculation.
Yeah.
What evidence supports these claims, and how are other world leaders reacting to Trump's win?
Good points. And Lanza was also critical of the level of support from the West.
Yeah.
He said it wasn't enough. But how much has the U.S. actually given, and were there any strings attached?
Okay, so the Kiel Institute tracks this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they say that the U.S. has given billions of dollars in military aid to Ukraine since the invasion started.
Oh, billions.
But there were restrictions on some weapons.
Okay.
You know, concern about escalating the conflict or having it spread to other countries.
So even with all that aid, there were still limits on what Ukraine could do.
Yeah, pretty much.
Man, this has complicated so many perspectives on achieving peace.
Right.
Plus a new U.S. president with unclear plans.
It really shows how messy and unpredictable global politics can be.
Absolutely.
And the stakes are so high, every decision could have crazy consequences.
Yeah, every action. Yeah, it's like peace isn't just about like waving a magic wand and everything's fine.
Right.
It's got to last, right?
It's about like creating something that's sustainable.
Yeah.
True peace. You have to address like the root causes of the conflict. You got to rebuild trust communication, figure out a way for people to coexist peacefully.
You know,
And that sounds like a really long and difficult process,
It won't be easy.
especially with all that's happened between Russia and Ukraine.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that, you know, at the end of the day, it's about people trying to rebuild their lives.
Yeah. Okay, so let's bring this back to our listener for a second.
Okay.
Imagine you're the president stepping into this whole situation,
Right.
knowing everything we've just talked about. How would you even begin to try and end this war?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? There's no simple answer. Every choice you make has risks and rewards.
It's like walking a tightrope. You want to support Ukraine and make sure Russia doesn't just get away with this.
Right.
But you don't want to make things worse and risk a bigger war.
You have to find that balance, you know, using diplomacy, providing military support, maybe even applying economic pressure. The goal is to create an environment where you can actually negotiate a settlement.
And that settlement has to work for both sides, right?
Yeah.
It has to address Ukraine's concerns, but also consider Russia's interests.
Exactly. Finding common ground is the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
There's so much distrust and animosity between the two sides.
It's like we need a whole new way of thinking about how to resolve these conflicts.
You might be right. The old ways of diplomacy, they might not be enough in a world with cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, and, you know, all that hybrid warfare.
Wow, that's a lot to think about. So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
there's a lot to ponder. The fate of Ukraine is uncertain. The U.S. has this major turning point in its global role, and the nature of conflict itself is changing.
It's a reminder that even with all the politics and strategy, it's ultimately about people,
Yeah.
their hopes, their fears, and their desire for a peaceful future.
As we move forward, it's important that we all stay engaged with this issue.
Yeah.
Ask tough questions, challenge assumptions, and hold our leaders accountable for their decisions.
Because building a peaceful and just world requires all of us to participate.
So that's it, a whole roller coaster of perspectives on the war in Ukraine and the possibilities for peace, especially after this U.S. election. Hopefully this deep dive sparks some new insights for you, and maybe you'll even dig a little deeper on your own.
Thanks for joining us. Every voice, every perspective helps us understand these complicated issues better. So keep those conversations going.